Hey, we're here with Brown Horse this morning, or this afternoon, evening, where you all are. Y'all are coming out to the Pacific Northwest here in a couple weeks. You're going to be playing at Trout Lake Hall on May 8th with Smile Pile. We're so stoked to have y'all. We don't get a ton of folks from across the pond, but it's always super exciting because we're just a tiny little mountain town, and we're basically at the end of the road. No one drives past us to go anywhere. So. Uh, Super excited to have you all and have you experience the hall. We've got Patrick, Emma, Niall, and Rowan, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
You just had a new record, Total Dive, that came out on the 10th of April. Really excellent record. Been listening to it a lot. What are some of the influences and inspirations that y'all had for this record?
Yeah, we've had a chance to talk about those a bit. We've Jason Molina keeps coming up in conversations, and that's kind of fair enough.
Now we'll all be brothers. The fossil fire of the sun.
I don't think it's sort of like a really conscious thing at this point that we're trying to sound like that, but it's an influence it's an association we'll happily go along with. Obviously, I think there's a kind of mood that we're trying to set in our albums, a kind of tone that is kind of similar to a lot of Songs Ohio albums and Magnolia Electric Company records, and so yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think probably on this one more than our other two records, Drive By Truckers, probably with a sort of a bit of an influence in that slightly sort of bigger, slightly rockier sort of sound.
I mean, I was actually listening to a lot of Jason Molina right before we went in the studio. I've been a bit more conscious for me. I watched there's a documentary that's really great where they're recording the album Josephine, Electrical Audio. With, and it's just so fun to see how like the process hasn't changed that much. And I think I did take a bit of that into the studio. There was a bit more on my side, sort of conscious chasing those guitar sounds. But also I've been listening to a lot of Neil Young, particularly Weld, the 90s live album, Crazy Horse. Absolutely insane guitar sounds. I've been loving that.
We love Modest Mouse as well, who I guess are from somewhere up in your area. So we like kind of their early records.
Short and love with a long divorce. And a couple of kids, of course, they don't.
That sounds kind of ended up coming through a bit on this newer record as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it really feels like this record could have been made in the Pacific Northwest. Like, what do gray days do to us that make us angsty and sad and hopeful and full of love? Do you all have any like specific Pacific Northwest bands? Rowan mentioned Modest Mouse. I feel like I hear some Pavement and maybe some like Built to Spill kind of feel in there. Are there any Pacific Northwest bands that you guys have tuned into?
I mean, those are all pretty fair comparisons. Yeah, love Pavement. We Built to Spill is something we've mentioned a few times as being quite a conscious influence, especially on our heavier parts. It was fun when we were mixing the album in Norfolk. We were like watching back on YouTube all these. They've got like the MTV. What's it called? That program, the
'Unplugged,
120 minutes.
Oh,
we're watching back the Pavement live sessions from that whilst we were mixing this record, which is really fun. Yeah, some pretty excruciating interview footage with Stephen Malkmus.
When you burn out on somebody, you just give them some space.
Hey, Stephen, looks like the most painful experience for you, is it?
It's not bad.
It's not bad?
It's just sitting next to me.
You're grimacing going, you're just going,
that wasn't, no. I think you misinterpreted me again.
I'm all about misinterpreting, I swear to God.
That's all right, Lewis. I'm the buffer guy.
Okay. God would love you for that.
So there's feels like there's a wave of slacker twang, slacker kana. I think you guys have a playlist on your Spotify that was named that. I love that term. Where does the like twang influence come from? Or do you listen to country records at home? Did your dad have a pedal steel that he forgot in his garage and you guys started playing with? Talk to me about that.
I don't think any of us really grew up with country. I mean, certainly not in my household. It was more of maybe like my granddad was kind of into country, but it was like seen as like a not cool thing when I was growing up. But I think it sort of came out more of us all sort of playing folk music together and then sort of finding country music through finding out more about British folk and like what happened next. And a big thing for us was watching the Ken Burns country music documentary. It was like a big education.
I think kind of weirdly, when I was a teenager, I fell into a group of people who played a lot of old time music. So yeah, I gravitated towards playing the banjo. And then when we first started playing music together, a lot of what we did was old time music. That old time folk sort of naturally evolved more towards the folk rock and even country music.
I mean, it's sort of like the music of the old country is what is the progenitor of Appalachian folk and then what becomes country music, right? So, we live out here in the hills, so we have lots of banjos on our stage. So, this is sort of like the natural environment for us is the music of the folks that came before. What's your favorite like sweater weather songs, like when you're feeling a little bit emotional and you want to like climb into something? Where do you go? What are the records you listen to?
Smog records are a good one for me, for that sort of feeling, sort of slightly isolated, insular, you're in it sort of music.
Let's move to the country. Let's move to the country. Just you and me.
Yeah, I've just been listening to so much Richard Buckner, just working my way through his albums the last year and a half. And yeah, I think they fit that bill pretty well.
Undoing the scenes you can't explain. Whatever you dream, that you've buried away.
I think maybe Simon Joyner is another one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that stuff goes
Yeah.
completely dark if you want it to.
That held the house together, that kept me out here in the cold. I knew the sun was gonna change the weather.
Rowan, do you get dark?
Yeah, occasionally.
Yes.
Brown gets pretty dark.
Yeah, I like the McGarrigle sisters. I've been listening to quite a lot. I was recently reading a book about their kind of lives in Montreal growing up.
Some say a heart is just like a wheel. When you bend it, you can't mend it. And my love.
So, the world is a dark place. Oftentimes I find myself reaching for certain records to like brighten my day a little bit. Do you guys have like the flip side? Where's the positive? What's the sunshine album that you reach for?
I feel like in the van there's like a collection of CDs we have, and I think going for like AM by Wilco, that's like super upbeat start to finish pretty much, and like that's just a good time.
Hey, wake up, your eyes weren't open wide. For the last couple of miles, you've been swerving from side to side.
And kind of ironically, I guess, I want to say the Dave Berman one as well, Purple Mountains album, even though it's obviously like super dark and there's this tragic side to it, but like they're bops, you know?
Yeah.
All my happiness is gone. All my happiness
Grateful Dead, I guess, for me. Yeah. 72 for me, that cheers me up.
Yeah. Which Dead era do you tap into?
I think early 70s.
Yeah.
Also like a Neil Young, Crazy Horse sort of stuff, you know.
I love Van Morrison, so that's kind of usually got a brighter, kind of fresh side to it. I mean, I kind of love Veed and Fleece, which is maybe them kind of dipping back into it.
Oh, my friend, I see you. Want you to come through. All right. Yeah, they're standing and
Like Cleaning Windows track was
Oh,
like a
yeah.
big staple.
Yeah, that's fun.
band
Cleaning
for a
Windows
while.
is, yeah.
Like it was like, okay, you're driving home from a show at 2 a.m. You've got to keep the driver awake. You're putting on Cleaning Windows. You're putting on Springsteen.
Oh, Drive By Truckers.
Yeah,
You know, like
Yeah,
along
I
with
mean,
that when
Angels
we.
and Fuselage, Drive By Truckers.
I think
It's
yeah.
again, it's just like the most depressing song ever. But like we would just be like absolutely howling along to that, having like the best time.
I'm scared shitless of what's coming next. And I'm scared shitless. These angels are
Yeah, sometimes catharsis is the best sunshine, right? Like
Yeah. really feeling it is kind of joyful in its own way.
So you guys are from Norwich, which is a very artistic musical place, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of known for being a bit more of like a literature town. But yeah, there's a ton of bands here, and it's a pretty good music scene.
A big sort of Norwich claim to fame for me is that Dave Parho from Slint, etc., lived here. I think went to art school here for a year. We don't know anyone who kind of was around at that time, but I like that sort of idea because it's such a kind of weird place that even people from England have never been to because you couldn't drive here on accident. You have to really like purposefully come here.
Yeah, it's
So
funny.
It's kind of funny that for some reason he was like, I'm going to get a plane and I'm going to go to Norwich and I'm going to go to art school there for a year.
Sometimes we look for the corners of the world, you know, to fold ourselves into. What are some Norwich bands that you're really excited about? It, you know, I feel like the per capita quality of bands out of the UK is always extremely high. So what are some of those like local regional acts that you're listening to and excited about?
There's like a pretty big like hardcore like punk kind of emo scene in Norwich. I think that's kind of like the main thing. We're kind of outliers. Me and Niall stumbled upon a band called Culk who were playing at a venue where Rowan works, and it was just like this amazing show, like completely different thing to like, you know, what we're doing. Just a guitarist singing and a drummer, and the guitarist was like plugged into like the bass amp and the guitar amp at the same time, and I'd never seen that before. They were just so great and made me really want to rework some of our earlier songs and try and get them really heavy like at points, and that's been really fun to just like take, you know, that and work it into our set a bit, and let the kind of like emo hardcore scene around us kind of like filter in by osmosis or whatever.
Any other local bands? Rowan, you work at a venue, so you're on the front lines. You see all of them.
Yeah, I see quite a lot. Yeah, it's a venue called the Holloway in Norwich, which does actually bring in quite a lot of artists from elsewhere, even though it's only a kind of 50, 60 capacity room. Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of friends who we've kind of played with at various points in the past. So we've some of the great bands are like Afra.
I ain't no sugar cube. My plate is empty and my stomach full.
Santa Rita, who are actually now in London but were here.
To your bones, you move so slow.
Phoebe Troop and Ben Old have played with us at various times.
Give me a chance or break my will. People are small and your face is dim. What is that ship I can fly away in?
Yeah, all kind of people we see all the time when we're out of the house.
You know, Patrick, you were talking about how you were having the kind of hardcore, heavier music kind of by osmosis come in, but it feels like there's some like native like heaviness to your music as well, right? Like where's some of that foundational influence? What are the heavy records that you guys listen to? Or who listens to the heavy music?
I guess like seeing Drive By Truckers play at this festival, that was like a really big moment. Like Niall was saying, we've been playing like old time standards and like covers of folk songs for years, and then we had this kind of seminal moment where we were in this big tent in this festival in the southeast of England, and yeah, it just kind of made us want to go out and buy the biggest amps possible and find a drummer, and so definitely that's kind of foundation for I think a lot of the kind of loud guitar sounds. But yeah,
I was a goth as a teenager. I was big into like Sepultura and Machine Head and Slipknot and stuff. So that's not stuff I dip into much anymore. But there's like an innate desire for sort of big heavy noise that sort of seeps out of me sometimes.
I was listening to a lot of like Polvo and Rodan and like Unwound before we went to the studio. So the kind of noisy side of indie.
What are some of your like core records that you guys go back to? Like what's your like warm blanket? This makes me feel good, not necessarily in a like bright sunshiny way, but just like for nostalgia. Like where are those nostalgia records and what are they for each one of y'all?
I think for me, Moonpix by Cat Power.
It's damned if you don't, it's damned if you do. Be true, 'cause I lock you up in the sad too.
I really love that, the sort of lyrics and the closeness, and yeah, something about that record just feels really nostalgic to me. So it's a great one to listen to when I'm on my own. It's a good headphones record, I think.
Maybe A River Ain't Too Much to Love by Smog.
Skin bags in the brambles. For the first part of my life, I thought women had orange skin. It wasn't.
Stuff.
Maybe like I don't know, like Blood on the Tracks or something.
They walked along by the old canal, a little confused, I remember well, and stopped into a strange hotel with a neon burning bright. He felt the heat of the night hit him like a freight train moving with a simple twist of fate.
Me and Patrick were both really into Dylan and the band, kind of first starting to play music together. So I think Dylan in quite a bit of depth, even like later albums and Modern Times, things like that. I can see they've got World Without Tears maybe on their mantelpiece.
I've been trying to enjoy all the fruits of my labor. I've been crying for you, boy.
That's the one I found in the charity shop that you were like, I'd never heard of her. This is like years and years and years ago. And Rowan was like, you should get that. You should buy that for £2 or whatever it was. And it's like now Lucinda Williams is like my absolute favorite, musician, but just hadn't come across before. And it's just
such a standard record or like central record in the kind of Americana alternative world, so many references to that I see in modern day. Such a great record.
Yeah, I love it.
What's okay, let's get a little embarrassing to finish up. So what's the guilty pleasure record that you're like just a little bit embarrassed to say that you enjoy?
Wait and Bleed by Slipknot. I think that's what
That's a great one.
I'll happily sit and listen to that, to be honest.
I'm not struggling because I think like, oh, my taste is so impeccable. I don't listen to anything I feel guilty about. there's probably so many, but oh man.
Yeah, it's a bit of a diss, isn't it? To like be like, this is the embarrassing record, because if you love it, you don't want to like, talk shit about it. You want to be like
Fair enough. But, I wore girl jeans for a period of my life and listened to emo music. So I have embarrassing records on the shelf.
I don't think we're particularly embarrassed by it, but we did a fundraiser recently where we played some kind of slightly more pop or like songs slightly out of our genre, and we had to go at Nickelback, which aren't usually considered one of the sort of but people aren't always proud of liking them. And we also did
we did a good job. That sounded good.
Shania Twain, which was a fun one. That's kind of a bit more mainstream country, but yeah, I think that's just a good song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman.
I bet if you bust that out on your American tour, you're just gonna get like the biggest reaction. Like something happening with 90s country in the US right now where people are just so about it. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time. It was super fun to talk with you. We're really looking forward to having y'all out here at the Hall on May 8th with Smile Pile. And definitely, if you're listening, go check out their new record, Total Dive. Just came out a couple weeks ago, available everywhere. Buy a record at the show.
Yeah, thanks, Ray.
Thanks so much.
It's been great.
Great to chat.